anything. I think everybody on the live webinar here knows me, but in case you don't and you're watching this later recorded, my name is Steve Robinson. I'm the founder and CEO of Brilliant Metrics. Past life, I was a software developer, and I try to avoid writing code, but end up writing quite a bit of it still today. And in addition to my work with Brilliant Metrics, I also teach a variety of digital marketing courses at UW-Milwaukee's School of Continuing Ed. One of those is a Facebook course, and it is a live, synchronous, but remote virtual class. So if you get value out of today and think you want to continue your education, that would be a great place to look. Personal side, I am married with 3 young children, the youngest of which is currently home because she doesn't do school yet. So I'm hoping she doesn't interrupt us, but we'll see how that goes. A little bit about Brilliant Metrics. We are a B2B digital first marketing agency. When I say digital first, that means that we prefer digital tactics, at least first, to make sure that they're working right. And then after that, we have no problem introducing traditional tactics. The reason our clients stick with us is really because we help them continuously move forward, whether that's in technology, capabilities, performance, and most importantly, results. But we help our clients continue to progress and move up what we call the marketing maturity model. But enough about I am sharing something on my screen. You just can't see it. Enough about me and enough about Brilliant Metrics. Let's dive into the meat here today. So the first thing we're going to cover is going to be why, as a B2B marketer, we would consider using Meta, which is the new term for Facebook, but includes Facebook and Instagram, because when you're advertising, you're doing it through the same interface. Once we get past the why, then we'll get into the how. And I've got 3 tactics for you that I think work really well, or I should say I know work really well from the work we've done with our clients for B2B. We'll pull them together into one cohesive potential program or campaign you could run yourself. Then we'll open things up for Q&A. We can take this wherever you need it to go to make this most actionable for you. So why Facebook and Instagram for B2B? Well, first, they're what's called a native advertising platform, meaning an ad looks an awful lot like the regular content. So people can't really skip the ads. It's not like banner ads on the web where it's really obvious what's a banner ad and it's really easy to just tune them out. When we're looking at Facebook or we're looking at Instagram, we have to flip through those posts that are ads to get to our nephew's 5th birthday party or to get to that funny meme or joke that we're really there to see, which means it's relatively immune to, the banner blindness or the tuning out of marketing messages. It doesn't require an opt-in like email, but you can use CRM contact information to target these people. So if you have a database of people that you can't email, this is a great outlet, and we'll talk about how to do that in a moment. It leverages what's called second-party data. So anytime we're using data to direct or target or to optimize paid media, that data can come from one of 3 places. It can come from ourselves, from our own database, from our own website, people interacting there. It can come from a third party, a data broker that we can buy that data from, or it can come from the platform itself. And in the case of Facebook and Instagram, they have some of the richest second-party data available anywhere. Every time you pause on a Facebook post inside of your feed, every time you like or comment or share an Instagram post, you are giving Facebook or Meta more data about who you are and the things that you like and your psychographic profile. We can use that to our advantage, even as B2B marketers. Finally, Facebook and Instagram or Meta has probably the best algorithm in the industry for optimization. Its algorithm, hands down, will take a mediocre performing ad and figure out how to find the best audience for it. Now, sometimes that'll work for us as B2B marketers, and sometimes that'll work against us. And I'll get into the details of exactly how and when in a moment. But that algorithm is definitely an asset and something you won't find on other platforms. Now, most people will come to me and they'll say, well, what about LinkedIn? I still get that same banner blindness immune environment there. It's still a native platform. I'm showing up in a feed there. Why can't we just use LinkedIn? And LinkedIn is a very valid strategy. We use it with almost all of our clients, but it's not the end all. And there are advantages to going outside of LinkedIn. So in particular, let's take a look at the audience here. When we look at Meta or Facebook and Instagram together, we see we have, depending on the overlap, somewhere between 200 million and 300 million people that we can reach in the United States on that platform. That's a big chunk of the population, at least the adult population here, right? Now, LinkedIn isn't a slouch. They're at 180. But the big difference is in the usage or who's active on these platforms. When we look at Meta, it's a pretty broad demographic reach. You know, the statistics show that pretty much anyone of any age is using Facebook, Instagram, or some combination of the two. You read a lot about people moving away from Instagram to TikTok and Snapchat, but the reality is most people are doing TikTok and Snapchat in addition to Instagram among those younger generations. The drop-off hasn't been quite as steep as the media would make it sound. Now, are they growing? No, they're not really growing, but they're kind of topping out. LinkedIn, on the other hand, there's a lot of people on LinkedIn, but the active users are almost all higher income and higher education. Now, as B2B marketers, we know that there's usually a buying committee behind who we're targeting. And so even if our primary decision maker or a sales champion is going to be a senior leader who's going to be higher income and higher education, the rest of the buying committee may not be present on LinkedIn. Now, if you're targeting marketing and salespeople, they're there in mass. But other professions, not so much. Some of the industrial professions, agriculture, a lot of blue collar type of companies, even the business owner isn't even on LinkedIn or not active there. So I think it's important when you're looking at who your audience is that you keep in mind you might need to diversify outside of LinkedIn to reach everyone on that buying committee. The biggest killer, though, to LinkedIn that makes Facebook just look shiny in comparison is the amount of time people spend on the platform. And this is changing. The stat's probably a year and a quarter old. It hasn't really been updated since then. I went looking last night to see if I could find a more recent one. But on LinkedIn, users spend about 17 minutes per month. And that is getting better as they've improved and gamified. You know, they've played the game of sucking people in and getting their attention. But Facebook and Instagram have been masters of that game for years, and they've gotten to the point that users spend between 1,000 and 2,000 minutes per month on average on their platform. That's a lot more attention. So you have a broader audience, you have them for a lot longer. That means a lot more inventory, which means that you're going to pay a premium CPM you're going to pay premium for those impressions on LinkedIn, but the cost per engagement, or I mean on Facebook and Instagram, but that cost per engagement is going to be a lot lower because there's so much inventory. LinkedIn, on the other hand, CPMs, the cost for every impression just goes up month over month. We saw a dip in January for some reason, but every other month it's gone up. And it's expensive. We're talking $100 to $200 per 1,000 impressions. It's not cheap as far as mediums go. And then that cost for every time you get someone to engage, well, that goes up and down, and it really fluctuates depending on the individual audience that you're looking at. So if you're trying to target C-suite executives, it can be pretty darn high. If your creative isn't just resonating like crazy, it can be pretty darn high. So what we see with with Facebook and Instagram is we're able to get those engagements at about half the cost, sometimes pennies in the dollar, depending on the tactic that we're running. And the cost to reach 1,000 people is usually in the $20 range, $25, $30 range. So again, a fraction of the cost to reach those 1,000 people that you'd get on LinkedIn. And we're reaching people across much broader demographics and getting more of their time. Oh, I want to add one more thing. Another thing I'll hear from B2B marketers is there value in my impression appearing in a B2B setting? In other words, I go to LinkedIn, I'm expecting other B2B messages, but if I go to Facebook, I'm not necessarily expecting that. And the answer is not really in this context. There have been studies that have shown that showing an ad in the context of another entity that you trust, such as a trade publication, that there is a slight lift there. But when it comes to whether seeing that impression on Facebook or on LinkedIn, it really doesn't matter all that much. And we see that play itself out in engagement rates, in the percentage of people that are clicking on things. All right. I subtitled this webinar 3 Killer Tactics. And the only thing I could think that was cheesier than subtitling a webinar 3 Killer Tactics is somebody naming their cute puppy Killer, thinking it's ironic. So I threw some photos in here just to keep things a little bit lighter. So killer tactic number 1 is CRM targeting. And in this instance, we're using Meta, we're using Facebook and Instagram as nothing more than a dumb pipe to deliver our content into the eyeballs of the people that we want to reach. So how does that work? Well, before I get to that, a couple of things to keep in mind. Before you can take your CRM data and upload it onto Facebook, you're going to want to make sure that you segment your audience first. Uploading everybody that's in your CRM as one big audience onto Facebook will generally fail because you're not going to be able to cater that content to the individuals. And as we get to in a minute, the algorithm won't help you. So you're going to want to take the time to segment that database and pull a particular role or industry or, subgroup of your CRM database before you upload it. Second, you want to upload as many fields as you can. Facebook will accept a first name, a last name. It'll accept gender or title as well, but we don't usually use that. It'll accept up to 3 email addresses and 3 phone numbers. So if you have personal emails in your database, those are hugely valuable in this context. And mobile numbers are hugely valuable in this context. But in addition to that, you can upload city, state, zip, and even a home address, as well as country. You can also update birth date, but I don't think any of us are keeping that information in our databases. The more information you upload, the better it can match. Now, it does some fuzzy matching when it comes to some of this B2B stuff, and I've heard from people who are in the know on the inner workings of Facebook that it actually does some pretty creepy things about figuring out where people work and then matching domain names accordingly. I don't know if that's true, but I do know you can get pretty good matches off of business emails. And I know most people don't put their business emails on their Facebook accounts. But in addition to that, if I match on Julian Ryerson in Cincinnati, Ohio, there may only be one Julian Ryerson in Cincinnati, Ohio on Facebook. And so it's pretty easy to find that match. And Jack in the chat asks, is there any value to uploading business addresses? And that's a great question. Yes, but you have to be a little bit careful. Depending on how your database is structured, you may have a headquarters address there, you may have a business location address, and you may have a home sitting in state sitting in your database. When we upload data for our clients, we'll go and prioritize those addresses. So if we have a home address or a home sitting in state, probably that came from LinkedIn as their metro area in LinkedIn or something like that. We'll take that first. If that doesn't exist, then we'll take just the city and state portion, not the actual, street address, but just the city and state portion of the the business location that they work at. And if that's not available, then in most cases, unless we're working off an enterprise database that we know most of the headquarters are way off from where the people actually live, we'll take the headquarters address or whatever the company address is off of the account record or company record, depending on the CRM or system. It gets it close enough for it to find more matches, and we've tried it both ways, and we found that that's how we get the most matches off of that CRM data. Now, I want to talk a little bit about privacy. It probably wouldn't surprise you to hear that, well, Meta doesn't really care about the privacy all that much. They leave it up to the person uploading the database, whether or not they have the rights to do so, whether they acquired that data through a third party or not. They try to be transparent about that, and they'll ask you, did you get this data first party or through did you purchase it? But they don't really care. You can use a ZoomInfo database and upload it straight to Facebook. That said, there are government entities that might care. And I'm not going to turn this into a privacy webinar because we could spend probably 4 hours talking about the GDPR if we really wanted to. But what you need to know is that there are regulations out there that really dictate what you can and can't do with data that you didn't acquire first party, firsthand, and you didn't obtain the consent for that data. You need to be aware of your obligations under various different platforms and rules about what you can and can't do with that data. And then from there, make your decisions when it comes to essentially risk versus reward. Now, looking long term, the more you can work with first party data that you actually got consent for, the better. That's really the ideal situation. If you can't do that, then work with the data you've got and then go from there. When you're advertising on Facebook using CRM data, you need to be very mindful of the algorithm. Like I said at the beginning, Meta has some of the best algorithms in the business. But like any good artificial intelligence, small data sets will really mess it up. When you're uploading CRM data, you're usually uploading data that, contacts that are in the low thousands. And you're only going to match 40 to 70% of that database. So that takes that number even further down. If you tell Facebook to use its algorithm to go find the best people among the ones that you uploaded, it's at best going to get confused, and at worst, it's not going to show your ads to very many people. So really, you already selected the targets. You just need the algorithm to get out of the way in this context. So to do that, you're going to want to make sure that you select awareness as your objective. And by selecting awareness as your objective, you're essentially telling Facebook to minimize its meddling with that particular algorithm. The other objectives that you set tell it which algorithm to use to optimize your campaign over time. And in this instance, you don't want it doing that much optimization, if any. If you have the old interface, because Facebook just changed this, I think, like last week, you're looking for a reach campaign. But if you're watching this in the future, you're probably looking at awareness. A couple of other little gotchas. Facebook did get in trouble a long time ago about privacy. It used to be that I think you needed 20 matches or something like that, or 20 people to get your ads to run. And I was actually on a call the other day with a guy who his business partner in the early days of this CRM targeting uploaded a list of 20 fake people that he created Facebook profiles for, and 19 fake people he created Facebook profiles for, and one that was a girl he wanted to ask out, and published an ad asking her out. You can't do that anymore. Facebook now wants a sizable audience before they'll let you run ads against it. What we found is that Running anything under 1,000 people is risky of not getting enough matches to work, which leads me to believe that you need somewhere around 500 matches or so in order to get the ad to run at all. So a really high quality data set, you can get away with less than 1,000, but not, you're talking like 700 or 800. If your data's kind of junky, then you're going to need even more. But that's how they prevent people from doing really creepy things on the platform. If you're continuously running campaigns, then you're going to want to update these CRM data sets, these CRM audiences on a fairly regular basis. If you're in that situation, you want to be running 2 at all times, because if you're only running 1 at a time and you go to refresh it, there's a button right in there. If you edit the audience, you can actually change out all the members of that audience. If you go to refresh it, Facebook will obliterate that audience and rebuild it from scratch, which means all of your advertising stops for anywhere between 4 hours and like 3 days, depending on the load on Facebook and how they have things tuned. So what you want to do is make sure you have 2 audiences running against that particular ad set at all times, and then just update 1 at a time. So the other one is always available and you never see that sudden drop off in traffic. And then finally, this is one of the of all of the Facebook targeting mechanisms, you end up with the tiniest audience this way, which means that if you don't change out the content, Facebook can only go so far to find new eyeballs to put that content in front of, and then it starts looping back over the same people. So it's really important to change your content out. Don't leave it out there for too long. We try with clients not to leave anything out there longer than a month, and then set it at a relatively low frequency so that it's hitting people once or twice a week over the course of that month, not every single day for a month. Your customers and your prospects will begin to get annoyed with you if they see the same thing in their Facebook feed every single day for a month or every single day for 3 months. So don't leave content out there too long. There's tools to manage frequency or how many times somebody sees your ad a week. Use those to keep it down a little bit so that you don't just annoy your audience. And I think that brings us to the end of tactic number 1, looking at killer tactic number 2, lookalike targeting. And this doesn't work for everyone, but for the clients that we found it does work for, it works well when you need to expand outside that CRM set that you uploaded. So how does this work? Well, first you create a CRM or retargeting audience, and we'll talk about retargeting a little bit later, but either one of them is a fine seed for building a lookalike. It's got to be decently sized though. So again, less than 1,000 people, you're not going to be able to build a lookalike off of it. And ideally, you're probably closer to 2,000. Meta will take a look at those people that you uploaded after it matched them, and it'll look for common attributes and behaviors in the audience that you created. And this is where the magic is, because I don't know about you, but I didn't put a whole lot of stuff in my Facebook profile about what I do for a living. But I have paused on plenty of ads that have popped up in my profile that nailed what it is I do for a living. And so my behaviors on the platform have really told Facebook a lot about what I know about and what I'm interested in. And because of that, it can pattern match me to a bunch of other business owners, and it can pattern match me to a bunch of other marketers, and it can pattern match me to a bunch of other geeks. And I'm probably in lookalikes for a data set for a bunch of those other people, not because of what I have in my profile, but because of the content that I have consumed over the lifetime of my Facebook account. So what Meta will do is it'll build an audience of similar people, and it's going to look at the data you upload and go, all these people are completely different in different places, but it will find the common behaviors among them, and it will build an audience of similar folks. And then where this gets really interesting is once you start to run ads against this audience, this is where that best algorithm in the industry comes in, because what it will do is it'll look at the behaviors and the attributes of the people that actually click on your ads, the people that like, comment, share, watch the video all the way to the end. It will look at those people and say, what other things do they like? Can I go find the people within this audience of lookalikes that look even more like the ones that have already engaged? And when you do this, you can get engagements and clicks less than $1 each all day long. But you have to do a couple things to make sure that that's still working for you. So one, you need to build your lookalikes off of narrow audiences. And what do I mean by narrow audience? Well, if I were to build a lookalike off of anybody who ever visited my website, that's a wide variety of people. And Meta is going to have a hard time looking at the behaviors of those individuals to find anything in common. But if I build a lookalike off of everybody that visited a particular industry page, they're all going to have something similar. The same thing with the CRM data set that I upload. If my CRM data set is everybody, it's not going to find necessarily common ties between them. But if I upload all the engineers, then it will find those folks. So the narrower the data set that you are working from to build your lookalike, the better it's going to be able to find the commonalities in behavior among those people to go find more people like that. When you create your lookalike, Meta will ask you how big of a lookalike audience do you want? We can go 1 million, I think up to 25 million. The answer is 1 million every single time, because you're B2B and your audience just isn't that big. You don't have a million people that you're looking for. You have a few thousand people potentially. In general, it'll prioritize the people that are the best lookalikes to get those ads in front of them at first anyway. And then that engine takes over of going to see, well, who responded? Let's go find more like that, etc. But the smaller the pool you give it to start with, the better it's going to work. So always kick that lookalike size down to 1 million, because it's going to work a little bit better for you. Now, when we talked about CRM targeting, we said to be careful of the algorithm. The algorithm works against you in that instance. Your data set's too small. It's not a good environment. The opposite is true with a lookalike audience. Here, in order to let Facebook find the right people amongst your audience, you need that algorithm knowing what's a good person. That really comes down to how you set up the campaign inside of Facebook. So again, here are our campaign objectives. There are 3 campaign objectives you want to use if you're running lookalikes. One is engagement. You're going to use engagement when you're running video content, because you're looking to double down on the people that watch that video all the way through, or at least, more than halfway, or 3 seconds in, or whatever the threshold is that, the majority of the good audience is watching it. Facebook will go find more people that watch the video if it knows to look at engagement in that video. If you're not running video, though, then you have 2 options. The first is sales. And now a lot of us in B2B, we don't close a sale through an ad. It would be nice if we could. But the buyer's journey is often a lot longer, and it involves lots of different steps. And our goal is to frame, educate, get a lead in, other things like that. It's not simple e-commerce, at least not in most cases. But what we can do is we can configure the pixel, the Facebook pixel on our website, to send a signal back to Facebook as to whether or not that was a good session on the other side there. So that could be through what we use with our clients is called soft conversions. Somebody who scrolls more than 50% on a long page, somebody who fills out a form for anything. It doesn't have to be a sale. Somebody who clicks and downloads a PDF, whatever those signals are, we send those back to Facebook as soft conversions and then optimize off of those. Now, if you're not able to either technically or just because of the nature of your business send those signals back, then you fall back to traffic. And here you're going to simply optimize on the people that clicked the ad. But if you set your campaign type to one of these three things, then the algorithm starts working for you, not against you. In addition to your campaign type, though, the content that you use really matters. When you're targeting lookalikes, you want to be very careful to avoid any topics that might be of broad interest. This is something we didn't know when we started using lookalikes, and we ended up really giving the algorithm some bad signals. So if you look at this little graphic here, we've got a bunch of people. The orange people are the people we want to target. Okay. The gray people are the people we don't want to target, but they're all in the lookalike audience. If we create content that is of broad appeal to folks outside of our target, outside the orange people, then they start clicking on that ad. And when they start clicking on the ad, there's more of them than there are orange people. So they're going to send some really bad signals to Meta about the type of people we really want to be clicking on this ad. And that whole like kick butt algorithm that Meta has that makes them one of the best in the industry goes out the window because we're giving them all kinds of noise. But if we give them content that only our target audience is going to engage with, now we give it signal and it can go and find more people like that within the audience because it knows what a good person looks like. So avoid topics of interest to the general public when you're using lookalikes. It'll just screw you up, and the algorithm can go sideways. And we called it with one client the little old lady problem, because it started optimizing for literally we would go look who was commenting on the posts, and it was all older women who apparently had a lot of time to go comment on posts. So killer tactic number 3 is retargeting, doubling down on those who express interest. This is pretty straightforward. If you've been in marketing for any amount of time, you're familiar with retargeting. When it comes to Meta, there's actually 2 different types of retargeting, though, and I want to touch on both of them. You have on-platform retargeting. This is retargeting those who engage with your page, your profile, or your content. And then you have pixel-based retargeting. Those are people who take action on your website or your app. Unfortunately, clicking on an ad is considered pixel-based at this time. You cannot retarget people who clicked on an ad. You have to retarget people that visited the web page that is the landing page for said ad. But I hope they change that at some point. The reason why I hope they change that at some point is because in addition to having, government authorities messing with us from a privacy perspective, we also have the technology platforms messing with us from a privacy perspective. And if you've read the news lately, Facebook stock took a major hit because they've been messing with Facebook pretty badly in the changes. The technology has. The government really didn't have an impact on their stocks. The two things of particular note were a particular version of iOS 14 and changes in browsers with cookies. And both of these have caused Facebook and Instagram to really have a hard time knowing what happens after somebody clicks on an ad. Facebook normally does something called link decoration and puts a click ID at the end of the URL when you click off of a Facebook ad onto a web page. If you opt out of tracking on iOS 14, it can't do that anymore. And so Facebook doesn't know what happens after that click. It also means that Facebook doesn't know who a lot of people are anymore when they're on your website. It used to be that if they ever came to your website from a Facebook post or ad, they connected the dots and they knew who that person was. Now, between third-party cookies being blocked and the changes with iOS 14, it's a crapshoot. There are some things we do with our clients to help improve Facebook's memory by essentially tying it to the marketing automation platform. And that helps, but it's still not a complete replacement. So if you can, retarget off of something like a video, and this is something we're hoping to introduce with more of our clients in the future. If somebody watches the video all the way through, that's when you go and you retarget them with a stronger call to action that's further down the funnel. A couple of keys to success with retargeting. You're going to want to be mindful of what you're retargeting off of. Generally, you want to start by putting some content out there that is middle of the funnel, or think state, as we call it with our clients. That type of content is content that indicates there's some degree of a problem or an opportunity that somebody's chasing, and some intent there, but not necessarily a need to purchase at that moment. But by having someone engage with that content, you build trust, you build authority, you frame the buying decision, and then you retarget off of that engagement with a really relevant follow-up to that particular point in the buyer's journey. It's all about relevance here. How can you provide the perfect offer for the relevant engagement that you're retargeting off of? When you're retargeting, we're back to that scenario one where the algorithm really isn't working for us again. In this instance, your target's self-selected. They took some action that indicated they had intent. You don't need the algorithm going to find the people that have intent. You found them already. The algorithm can only mess you up at this point. And again, you're talking about small data sets. Your retargeting audiences are even smaller than your CRM audiences in many cases. So you do not want the algorithm making your pool even smaller. So again, when you're using retargeting, always select that awareness campaign objective. Reach if you have the old interface to minimize the opportunity for the algorithm to meddle in your advertising. All right, let's put it all together. So if we were to take all three of these, killer tactics and throw them into a single program or campaign, we could start out with some CRM targeting of some middle of the funnel content, a CRM lookalike off of this CRM audience with the same middle of the funnel content, or maybe different middle of the funnel content, depending on how it's structured. Anybody who visits the landing page off of this or watches this video all the way through, we retarget with the bottom of the funnel offer, which then leads down here to conversion. This play works very, very well. And there are ways to run it at scale in a continuous running manner, which is what we do with our clients based on mapping out the buyer's journey, or you can run it as a one-off. And with that, I'm going to leave us to some questions here. If anyone has a question and you'd like to talk, you can raise your hand and I will unmute you. Otherwise, toss it into chat. I did address a couple of them live, which I guess is my fault. Okay. If anything does come to mind after the end of this, please feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn or email. My email address is right here. And as always, be sure to follow Brilliant Metrics on LinkedIn if you want to be aware of future thought leadership there. Aside from webinars, we usually do a good job of sending emails on webinars. And somebody asked if the recording will be available. Yes, you will receive an email with a link to the recording after we're done getting it processed. Thank you very much. And until next time, have a wonderful day.